Okay. So for those who are watching the Zoom, can you hear the sound of my voice? Give me a thumbs up if you can. Okay, I see 2 thumbs up. Okay. Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom to those who are watching on the Zoom. For those who are here in the atrium of Beth Shalom, we welcome you to Shabbat Shuvah, these days of turning, the Shabbat of turning in between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. We thank those of you who came in person. We know it's been hard to make the transition, we have found, from sitting in front of the screen to coming in person, and we're not serving food yet. It's been a tough sell. So we thank you all for being here, those of you who are here, and we're hoping maybe a couple more will come. So we'll have a minyan in person. But in the meantime, we're going to do a lot of singing. Our Chazan is here, and I believe that 2 of his colleagues are with us. And so 1 colleague and 1 friend of a colleague. Okay. So we'll introduce ourselves a little bit later in the service. And in the meantime, we welcome everyone who's here and those who are watching. And Cantor Gar is going to lead us in Shalom Aleichem on page 13 of our Siddur.
Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Asharet, Malachei Elyon, Mimelechem, Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Boakem leShalom, Malachei Ashalom, Malachei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Baruchuni leShalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon. Mimelech Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Tzedechem leShalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon. Mimelech Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
Turn with us as we continue on page 16 of your Siddur, Yismechu Hashemayim.
Yismechu Hashamayim, Yismechu Hashamayim, Yismechu Hashamayim, Betagel Haaretz. Yismechu Hashamayim, Yismechu Hashamayim, Yismechu Hashamayim, Betagel Haaretz. Yiramayam, 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 Umelo. Yiramayam, 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 Umelo. Yiramayam, 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 Umelo. Yiramayam, 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 Umelo. Yismechu Hashamayim, Yismechu Hashamayim, Yismechu Hashamayim, Betagel Haaretz.
Continuing now, 2 lines from the bottom of page 17. Or Zarua, you say that light is brought forth when we bring righteousness into this world. Page 17.
Or זרו על הצדיק ולא ישרה לב שמחה אור זרו על הצדיק ולא ישרה לב שמחה שמחו צדיקים באדוני והודו לזכר קודשו צדיקים באדוני והודו לזכר קודשו אור זרו על הצדיק ולא ישרה לב שמחה אור זרו על הצדיק ולא ישרה לב שמחה.
We turn now to page 19 and join together as we sing Craig Taubman's Romemu, 3 lines from the bottom of page 19.
רוממו אדוני אלוהינו והשתחוו להר קודשו רוממו אדוני אלוהינו והשתחוו להר קודשו כי קדוש אדוני אלוהינו רוממו כי קדוש אדוני אלוהינו רוממו אדוני אלוהינו והשתחוו להר קודשו רוממו אדוני אלוהינו והשתחוו להר קודשו כי קדוש אדוני אלוהינו רוממו כי קדוש אדוני אלוהינו רוממו אדוני אלוהינו והשתחוו להר קודשו רוממו אדוני אלוהינו והשתחוו להר קודשו כי קדוש אדוני אלוהינו כי קדוש אדוני אלוהינו רוממו אדוני אלוהינו והשתחוו להר קודשו רוממו אדוני אלוהינו והשתחוו להר קודשו.
We're going to continue with Mizmor LeDavid. As we've said on many occasions, it's custom traditionally to rise. Some of us feel like sitting makes us feel it's more Shabbostic. So whatever is your Shabbos pleasure, whether in terms of your posture, we continue on page 20 with Mizmor LeDavid.
מזמור לדוד, הבו לאדוני בני אלים, הבו לאדוני, כבוד ועוז, הבו לאדוני, כבוד שמו, השתחוו לאדוני בהדרת קודש, כל אדוני על המים, אל הכבוד הרים, אדוני על המים, רבים, על אדוני בכוח, כל אדוני בהדר, כל אדוני שובר ארזים, וישבר אדוני את ארזי הלבנון, וירקידם כמו עגל, ובכי חלום, כולו מרכבות, אדוני למבול ישב, וישב אדוני מלך לעולם. איי 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 אדוני יודע מה ייתן, אדוני יברך את עמו בשלום בשלום, יברך את עמו בשלום.
Please feel free to be seated. We're going to continue as we welcome the Shekhinah with Lecha Dodi. We'll be doing the first two and last verses on page 21, and then as we're already outdoors as the Kabbalist would do, we'll face east, which is behind me, as we welcome God's presence in the final verse on page 22.
La 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 Lecha Dodi לקראת קלה בני שבת נקבלה. Lecha Dodi לקראת קלה בני שבת נקבלה. שמור וזכור בדיבורך, השמיענו אל המיוחד. אדוני אחד ושמו אחד, לשם ולתפארת ולתהילה. Lecha Dodi לקראת קלה בני שבת נקבלה. Lecha Dodi לקראת קלה בני שבת נקבלה. לקראת שבת לכוון אליך, כי היא מקור הברכה. מראש מקדם נשואה, סוף מעשה במחשבה תחילה. Lecha Dodi לקראת קלה בני שבת נקבלה. Lecha Dodi לקראת קלה בני שבת נקבלה. התעוררי, התעוררי, מהעורק קומי אורי, 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 שיר דברי, כבוד אדוני עלייך נגלה. Lecha Dodi לקראת קלה בני שבת נקבלה. Lecha Dodi לקראת קלה בני שבת נקבלה. בואי ושלום עטרת בעלה, גם בשמחה ובצהלה, תוך אמוני עם סגולה. בואי כלה, בואי כלה, לך דודי לקראת כלה. בני שבת נקבלה, לך דודי לקראת כלה. בני שבת נקבלה, לך דודי לקראת כלה. בני שבת נקבלה.
Feel free to be seated. I want to say Yasher Koch. That was a beautiful, beautiful new Lachadoni melody that Chazan has brought to us from Nava Tehillah, from Eretz Israel, and the Kabbalists of Svat gave us this service. It was beautiful to hear this melody from the land of Israel to welcome Shabbat. We're going to continue on page 23, Tzadika Tamar, Psalm 92.
צדיק כתמר יפרח, כרז בלבנון יסגע, שתולים בבית אדוני, בקצרות אלוהינו יפריחו. עוד ינובון בסבע, דשנים דרעננים יהיו, להגיד כי ישר אדוני, צורי צורי ולא עוולת בו.
Since we have a minyan, thanks to Marcel and John, we want to invite those of you in the process of mourning or observing a yahrzeit to please rise, and those of you at home to feel free to join us as we conclude Kabbalat Shabbat with Kadishat Tom on page 24. Yit Gadal v'yit Kadash Shemei Rabbah.
Amen.
V'yalma divrach hirutei v'yamlich malchutei. V'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael ba'agala u'vizman kariv v'yimru. Amen. Yehei Shemei Rabbah mevorach li'olam almei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yithadar v'yitalev v'yithalal shemei dekudesha b'richu. Le'ela le'ela mikol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata damiran b'yalma v'yimru. Amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chaim aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'yimru. Amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'yimru.
Amen.
So I want to just take a moment or two to invite us, those of us who are here, and also for those of us who are on the watching at home. This Shabbat is the Shabbat that ushers in the 20th anniversary, I think as many of you are aware, of 9/11. And looking at my colleague and his friends, I know that you were children at the time that 9/11 took place. But for those of us who were well into adulthood, I know that for all of us, this is one of those days that, that was one of those days 20 years ago that remain forever seared into our consciousness. My wife Deborah was talking to a very close friend of ours who lives in Manhattan today, and her friend Amy was saying that the way this day, the feel of the day in terms of the brightness of the sun and the kind of first hint of a cool sense that fall was in the air was exactly how it felt 20 years ago on 9/11. There was that sense of just bright sun and the first hint of the coolness of the fall that had started to be felt in the air as that day unfolded. And so I wanted to just ask if people had one image, one memory, one short image or memory that that lingers for you and that perhaps resonates even beyond this day. And since those of us who are here in person are exactly a minion, so we'll invite, since people are watching at home, maybe, I don't know, it feels weird but if people wouldn't mind coming up to introduce themselves if they have a memory, that would be lovely. So I'm David Glansberg-Cranen, and I'll start off just by saying, my memory of that day is that for me, this felt like the day that we lost our innocence as Americans. It just felt like this was the day that it felt like I hadn't experienced America at a time of vulnerability, like during a Second World War type of thing. But to me, my memory was that it felt like we were vulnerable as Americans in a way that was the first time I'd remember feeling that way. And having kids, my kids that at that point in their lives were probably 2, 5, and 8, and I remember that school, they decided that by about 11 o'clock in the morning, school was going to be canceled. And we were living in Westchester, Pennsylvania. For those of you who know New York, it's not Westchester, New York, and our kids went to school in Wilmington, Delaware. I remember driving down with Deborah to pick up our kids from school, and what an eerie feeling it was to try to think about how to talk about what 9/11, why school was being closed to a 5 and an 8-year-old. But anyhow, anyone want to just say hello, who you are? This is where the camera is facing for people at home, and just if you have a memory or something you want to say about 9/11. Jerry, you want to?
Sure.
All right, you can take the mic, and those are the people who are watching you.
I'm Jerry Gordon. I worked in Manhattan at the time. I remember coming in on a train, and a woman had her cell phone or some other information. She said a plane just hit one of the towers. I said to myself, oh, some small plane. How could they have such a silly accident? And about 5 minutes later, she said there was a second plane. And I knew it was no accident. And my daughter called later in the day. She forgot where my office was. I was uptown, not downtown. So those are my memories.
Thanks, Jerry. You want to pass it to your wife?
Good Shabbos. I'm Elaine Wolfson Gordon. I was not married yet to Jerry, and I was living in Broad Axe, Pennsylvania, dressing for work, having the morning TV on, and then it all happened, this catastrophic situation. My first thought was my darling nephew, David Summers, worked in New York. I didn't even know Jerry at the time, so I quickly called my sister to say, where is David? So thank God he was safe, but what a catastrophic memory for all of us.
Val and Jody, want to just say just a quick introduction, just because we're going to invite, since we're...
Shabbat Shalom. I'm Joe Lieberman, my wife Valerie. And the day 9/11, right before that, we were planning our son's bar mitzvah in early October, and we were, just so happy and everything. And I just remember that when I first got the news of what had happened in New York, I felt like someone stabbed me in the back, and my life just stopped. And it just took days and weeks for me to think about the bar mitzvah again. It was just awful. One of the most awful experiences in my life.
Hi, I'm Valerie Lieberman, and our daughter was living in New York at the time, and she called us to make sure that we were okay. And she said, "Mom, did you see what happened on the news today?" And we were planning the bar mitzvah word. Told her, "Don't go out, don't do anything, just, stay home, stay home." It was very scary. It was very scary.
All right, John and Marcel, we'll ask if you guys want to say hello. And
Shabbat Shalom. I'm Marcel Shapiro, my husband.
I'm John Bate.
So there's several memories that I have from that day. Number one, I was supposed to be in New York that day, but I had to work, and I was working, and my nurse came into the angio suite where I was, and she said to me, her husband just called her, and a plane had hit the towers. I went on, obviously our breath was taken away, continued the procedure, and then when I was finished, I went into an area I could go on. And the first tower was on flames, and then as I was watching it, so time had passed, I watched the second plane hit. And at that moment, I was just overcome because I knew we were under attack. The next thought was, where are my kids? Where are my kids safe? What's happening? And it's interesting that you said your kids were in school, were sent home. Our kids were kept at school because they felt it was a safe haven, and it was, our kids were coming to Beth Shalom afterwards for Hebrew school. And I was speaking with our nanny at the time, and she said no, they wanted the kids to come to Beth Shalom as a safe haven because we were working, John and I were at work, and so the kids came to the synagogue, and they felt secure. They did not know, my kids are like your kids' age, they were 5 and 8, and they felt very secure being in shul. And when we brought them home, the final piece was that, remember, they stopped all the air traffic in the United States. Right. And our home is usually a flight path for planes. We always see planes, hear planes. And it was eerily quiet. And the girls noticed that right away. They said, it's so quiet. And then we had to deal with that. So it was the highs and lows of it. The safe haven being in this synagogue, in their home, if you will, home away from home. But then the horror of what had happened was just overwhelming.
Marcel and I didn't compare notes before he came, but I was going to say the exact same thing, how eerie it was to have dead silence in our backyard. And extending beyond the day, I just remember how incredibly sad I was, and just seeing the faces of everyone I come to and meet, the overwhelming grief, and everyone thinking about the poor souls in Manhattan. For a very, very long time, I was probably the saddest I've been, probably my life.
do you want to, we'd love to at least have you introduce yourselves. You don't have to, you guys were kids, so we don't expect you to just come and say hello.
Hi, I'm Shayna Purak. I live in New York now, and I'm visiting my sister in Philly, and I'm glad we got to come for Shabbat Shuvah. We were almost exactly 5 and 8 at the time. I was a couple months short of 8, so I don't remember too much. I remember having to draw pictures of what happened. Our teacher just put out a bunch of crayons and said, draw what you saw on TV. And I still remember what I draw, but that's the extent of my memory.
Hi, I'm Alana Burak. I'm Shayna's younger sister. I was 5. I don't remember. I don't remember anything. I think I maybe remember just seeing like one shot on the TV screen of like a plane hitting a building, and I was like, I don't understand, and that's really all I remember.
Cantor, do you want to?
Sure.
I'm Jacob Agar, and I actually was in school then. I was 10 years old, and suddenly they told us they brought us all to the lunchroom, to the cafeteria. They locked the doors. They said something horrible is going on. We were all confused, the kids, and then my mom came and picked me up with my sister, and we came home. And my mom was very worried because my dad was working right around the block from the World Trade Center in a different building, and he actually saw it all happening in front of his eyes. But luckily he was safe, and then he was trying to get out of the city, but they of course closed all the bridges and everything. So it took him, like the drive usually would have been an hour, it took him I think 6 or 7 hours to get home. But yeah, that was it, and a lot of my cousins came over after that. We were all just kind of shocked and confused.
Thank you all for sharing, and I hope for those of you who are watching on the Zoom that you should feel free, if you want to put something into the chat, to let those of you who are watching the Zoom know if there was a short memory that you would want to share. The one thing I wanted to say, and I'm going to talk a little bit about this tomorrow as my Devar Torah, about my sense that is that, you know, one of the most beautiful things that came out of the horror of 9/11 was the sense to which we felt like we were all one nation. We were a united States of America, and the sense of people's willingness to donate blood, to give tzedakah, to do all, to say hello to neighbors and ask if they were okay and how they were doing. There was this sense, it was a palpable sense for really months after 9/11 that people were nicer to each other, kinder to each other, more generous with each other. And the question, especially for us on Shabbat Shuvah, is how did those feelings about who we could be, both as individuals and as a country, how did that disappear over time, where today we can look out and say that we're at one of the most divided times we've ever been as a country in terms of our politics, in terms of so many things. And you know, it really does, and I'll speak a little bit more about this tomorrow, about this season of turning and of doing tshuva is about glimpsing the possibility of something we might become, but then it's about making the commitment to actually make the change and make it a lasting change. And that's not easy to do. That's the hard stuff. It's easy to catch a glimpse, and it's easy to kind of make a start, but it's hard to keep something that really is important alive. And that's what happens through the day-to-day and the real commitment to change. And that's really what we're being asked to do at this time of year, is to make those daily commitments to becoming a little bit more the people that God has created us to be. So on this Shabbat, wish everyone a sense of the remembrance of those who lost their lives at 9/11, and a remembrance of who we might be and who we saw ourselves to be, those of us who are old enough to have that memory, and that we should have that ability to commit to those ideals in our lives even 20 years later. Shabbat Shalom.
Shalom.
Chazan is going to lead us in Baruch Hu. We invite you to rise if you are able, page 28.
Baruch hu et Adonai Hamorach.
Baruch Adonai Mevorach le'olam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Mevorach le'olam
I
va'ed.
invite you to be seated as we continue on page 28 privately.
Baruch Adonai Mevorach le'olam va'ed michochma potech sharim. ומעביר יום ולילה, ומבדיל בין יום ולילה, אדוני צבאות שמו, אל חי וקיים, תמיד ימלוך עלינו לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני,
Shema.
המעריב ורביב.
Join with us in a melody that the cantor composed, Ahavat Olam, page 29.
La 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 la. אהבת עולם בית ישראל עמך אהבת, תורה ומצוות חוקים ומשפטים אותנו למדת. על כן אדוני אלוהינו בשוכבנו ובקומנו נשיח בחוקיך ונשמח בדברי תורתך ומצוותיך לעולם ועד. כי הם חיינו ויורך ימינו ובהם נהגם יומם יומם ולילה. על כן אדוני אלוהינו בשוכבנו ובקומנו נשיח בחוקיך ונשמח בדברי תורתך ומצוותיך לעולם ועד. ואהבתך אל תסיר ממנו לעולמים. ברוך אתה אדוני
Shema.
אוהב עמו ישראל. שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו אדוני אחד. ברוך שם כבוד מלכותו לעולם ועד. ויאהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך וקשרתם להיות על ידך. והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. והיה משמעו תשמעו מצוותי אשר אנוכי מצוותכם היום. הישמרו לכם פן יפתה לכם וסרתם ושמתם דברי אלה על לבבכם ועל נפשכם וקשרתם אותם לאבותיכם לתת להם כימי השמיים על הארץ. ויאמר אדוני אל משה לאמור דבר אל בני ישראל ואמרת עליהם ויעשו להם ציצית על כנפי בגדיהם לדורותם ונתנו על ציצית הכנף פתיל תכלת והיה לכם לציצית וריתם אותו וזכרתם את כל מצוות אדוני ועשיתם אותם
ולא תטורו אחרי לבבכם ואחרי עיניכם אשר אתם זונים אחריכם למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים אני אדוני אלוהיכם אדוני אלוהיכם
Continuing privately, page 32. Emet v'nakol zol.
מבנה כל זאת וקיים עלינו כי ידו אלוהינו ואין זו לא טוב ואנחנו ישראל עמו
Asam nafshenu v'chaim lana, tamrak.
המקים ומלכותו ברצון קיבלו עליהם משה בני ישראל לחנו שירה בשמחה רבה ויאמרו כולם la 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 מי כמוך באלים אדוני מי כמוך נהדר בקודש נורת אוסף אלה נורת תהילות אוסף אלה מלכותך ראו בניך בוקע ים לפני משה זה לי אנו ויאמרו זה לי אנו ויאמרו אדוני ימלוך לעולם האל אדוני ימלוך לעולם האל לה 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 ונאמר כי פתת את יעקב גלו מיד חזק ממנו ברוך אתה אדוני גל ישראל.
Chassan, since you have a colleague here, do you want to do Hashkivenu in a round?
If she wants to.
So the two of you can each do one, lead us in one of the different lines. We can do it as a round. It'll be. There you go.
We haven't practiced this, so.
It's okay. It's okay.
It could go badly.
It'll go badly. It'll go great.
השכיבנו אדוני אלוהינו לשלום והעמידנו מלכנו לחיים השכיבנו אדוני אלוהינו לשלום והעמידנו מלכנו לחיים השכיבנו אדוני אלוהינו לשלום והעמידנו מלכנו לחיים ושמור צאתנו ובואנו לחיים ולשלום מידע ויד עולם השכיבנו אדוני אלוהינו לשלום והעמידנו מלכנו לחיים השכיבנו אדוני אלוהינו לשלום לשלום, והעמידנו מלכנו לחיים, השכיבנו אדוני אלוהינו לשלום, והעמידנו מלכנו לחיים, השכיבנו אדוני אלוהינו לשלום, והעמידנו מלכנו לחיים. ושמור זנבכם לשלום אתה ועד עולם, ופרוס נשקה שלמך ברוכת אדוני, הפורסוקה של מלין וכל מו ישראל, ויעל ירושלים.
Man, not bad guys for no practice, let's just say. It was awesome. Thank you, Shana. Thank you, both of you. That was beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. We'll continue on page 34 with Vishamru.
ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם, לדורותם ברית עולם. ישראל, ודהי, ודהי לעולם, ביני ובין בני ישראל, ודהי, ודהי לעולם. כי ששת ימים עשה עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ, וביום השביעי שבת, שבת ויהי נפש. ביני ובין בני ישראל, ודהי, ודהי לעולם, ביני ובין בני ישראל, ודהי, ודהי לעולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם, לדורותם ברית עולם.
Invite you to rise if you are able as we continue now with the Chatzi Kaddish. We want to just remind people that because this is Shabbat, we still use those God's sovereignty additions, the Malchuyot that you will find that are interspersed throughout the Amidah prayer. So as we daven this privately, you'll note that there are several places where we include Zochreinu L'chaim, and we include Michamocha Av Harachamim, Zocher Yitzurav, and we say Hamelech HaKadosh, and then there are some additional inserts before we conclude the Amidah. So we continue now with the Chatzi Kaddish, and then some time for our own private prayers, pages 35 through 38.
יתקדש ויתקדש שמי רבה, בלמד יברא קירותי ומלך מלכותי, בחייכון וביום אחד ובחיי לכל בית ישראל, בגאלה
הגלה ובזמן קריב ויאמרו אמן. יש מירב המבורך לעולם ולעלמי המאיה יתברך יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי לקודשה בריחו לילה לילה מכל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה רמירן ביעלמה ויאמרו אמן.
Those of you who are still davening, please continue to do so. Those of you who have concluded can join the Chazan in Oseh Shalom.
Oseh Shalom bimromav hu yaseh shalom aleinu ועל כל ישראל ויאמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו ויעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ויאמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ויעלה כל ישראל ויאמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ויאמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ויאמרו אמן. ויאמרו
Continue Kaddish Shalem, page 48.
יתקדל ויתקדש שמי רבה. בעלמא דברה קירותי וימליך מלכותי. בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי כל בית ישראל. בעגלה ובזמן קריב ויאמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך לעולם ולעלמי עלמיה יתברך. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל. שמי דקודשה שמי דקודשה ברכו לילה לילה מכל ברכתה ושירתה. תושבקתה ונחמתה דמירן בעלמה. ויאמרו אמן. תתקבל צלותיכון ובתיכון בית ישראל. קודם אבוהון דבישמיא ויאמרו אמן. יהי שלמה רבה מן שמיא וחיים טובים עלינו ועל כל ישראל. ויאמרו אמן. עושה שלום ממרום יעשה שלום עלינו עלינו ועל כל ישראל. ויאמרו אמן.
Chazan, Kiddush.
קידוש. ברוך אתה אדוני מלך העולם בורא פרי הגפן.
Amen.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר קידשה מצוותיו ורצה ושבת קודשו באהבה וברצון הנחילנו וזיכרון למעשה בראשית. כי הוא יום תחילה למקרא קודש זכר ליציאת מצרים. כי באנו בחרת ואותנו קידשת מכל העמים. ושבת קודשך באהבה וברצון הנחלתנו. ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת. Amen.
We'll invite you to be seated momentarily. If you had one thing that you could ask of God, what would it be? One thing that you could ask of God. Well, the psalm tells us that if that psalmist, he, she, or they, whoever wrote the psalm, had one thing that they could ask of God, it would be to dwell in God's house. To dwell in God's house all the days of that person's life. For me, what I understand that to mean, and this is not by any means meant to be the definitive explanation, is that if I could live my life with that God consciousness all the days of my life and see God's presence in so many parts of the world, that to me would be living in God's house. Seeing the world through, Abraham Heschel would say, through radical amazement eyes of God's presence. That's what dwelling in God's house would be. So let's ask each one of us what that one thing we would ask of God. Achat sha'alti. On page 80 of your Siddur, the words from Psalm 27, the psalm that we are saying at this time of the year? What are we asking of God?
הקדש עלתי מת אדוני עוד אבקש הקדש עלתי מת אדוני עוד אבקש שיבתי בבית אדוני כל ימי חיי לחזות בנועם בנועם אדוני ולבקר בהיכלו לחזות בנועם בנועם אדוני ולבקר
We'll turn back to page 51, and if we're able to rise, please do so for Aleinu.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי ארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל עמונם. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. על כן נקבלך נהנו לראות מהרה בתפארת וזכר לפניך אלוהינו מלכותך. ככתוב בתורתך אדוני מלוך לעולם ועד ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו echad.
We invite those of you in the process of mourning or observing yahrzeit to remain standing. We would like to invite you, if you're saying Kaddish, to tell us the name and the relationship of the person for whom you're saying Kaddish.
My mother's Charlotte Wolfson.
Charlotte Wolfson, Zichronali Bracha. Ginger Block, Zichronali Bracha. We ask all those who are watching on the Zoom as well to join with us in Mourner's Kaddish, page 52. Yit Gadal v'yit Kadash Shemei Rabbah. Yalma divrach yirutei lich malchutei. V'chayechon v'yomechon. V'chayei dechol beit Yisrael. Bagala uvizman kariv v'imru. Amen. Yehei Shemei Rabbah mevorach le'olam omei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yit'aleh v'yit'alal. Shemei dekudasha b'richu. Le'ela mikol birchata v'shirata. Tush b'chata v'nechamata. Amiran v'alma v'imru. Amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemayim. Chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Oseh shalom b'mramav. Hu ya'aseh shalom. Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Yes, God who grants peace and comfort on high, to grant peace and comfort to those of you who are remembering loved ones. We want to thank Chazan Agar for leading us in a beautiful, beautiful Kabbalat Shabbat and Mariv service, and Shana for your impromptu duet, which, by the way, someone who wrote on the chat that we can see said, that duet was magnificent. So if you want to think about leading a Don Olam together, you're welcome to that. But obviously, you should feel free to sit with your sister. But I would, I think you'd have a big group of groupies forming if you decided to sing together for a Don Olam. Just a couple of announcements before we conclude. Tomorrow morning service is at 9:30. We're going to be outdoors tomorrow as well. So for those of you who are a little nervous about being in indoor spaces, we will be back out here tomorrow at 9:30. Havdalah will be on Zoom, and that will be Zoom only. You have gotten your schedules of what's happening with Yom Kippur services, so I'm not going to go through the whole schedule. But don't forget that very soon after Yom Kippur, Sukkot will be here. This tent will be transformed into a sukkah, so we will be able to have some festive celebrations of Sukkot here in this area, but not with a tent, but with a beautiful sukkah. So we hope we'll see many of you for the festival of Sukkot. All right, they're going over the little music of Adon Olam, so I think we're going to get another duet. We're very excited. Page 54.
Adon Olam asher mala b'terem hakol yetzir nivra li'et nasa v'chefzo kol azay melech shemo nikra v'yakarek yiklot hakol לבדו ימלוך נורא והוא היה והוא הווה והוא יהיה בתפארה והוא אחד ואין שני להמשילו להכבירה בלי ראשית בלי תכלית ולא העוז והמשרה והוא אלי וחי גואלי וצור חבלי בעת צרה והוא ניסי ומנוס לי מנס כוסי ביום אקרא ידו אפיד רוחי בעת ישן ויעירה ועם רוחי גבייתי אדוני לי ולא יירא.
Yashar Kol Chacham. Thank you both. Shabbat Shalom to
Shabbat
everyone.
Shalom.
Shabbat
Shabbat
Shalom. What a treat. What a treat.
Good idea.
Sometimes the best things happen spontaneously.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that was gorgeous.
Oh, thank you.
Gorgeous,
Thank you.
gorgeous, gorgeous. I don't know what to do with my time.
I have a prayer.
Oh, here.
Somebody marked up the first 50 pages. I think that would be.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Good seeing you too. See you tomorrow.
I don't, it is, yeah. And are they both marked up this much?